Hey, welcome to our podcast. We're going to be talking about technology, and I've got Todd Boutte, Trenegy's technology leader. Todd, how are you today?
Good, Bill. Thanks. Looking forward to doing this new series. This will be great.
Well, I'll tell you what. Every time I turn on anything on the, on LinkedIn or Twitter or anything like that, they're talking about ChatGPT and how it's going to change the world. And I thought it would be great for you and I to chat a little bit about this, because it sounds like something that's everybody's talking about it. I'm skeptical when I hear about stuff like this, because I always think It's like it's the next self-driving car or flying hoverboard or something. But
right, it's going to come right in and take your job right away, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's what they're saying.
For everybody, it's going to do everything for us. It's going to write articles for us. It's going to code for us. It's going to do everything. And then the latest one I heard, it's going to make Google searches obsolete. And so,
maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. We'll talk about that.
Yeah. Then how are we going to get ads? Is that going to be part of it too?
Exactly.
Well, anyway, Todd, give us a little background on ChatGPT for those who aren't familiar with that.
Yeah, sure. So this goes back years, and it's just sort of hitting the mainstream. So this is revision 3. So you'll see ChatGPT 3 out there in the world. And this is about 2 years old, and it's from a company called OpenAI. And they've been working for about a decade on collating what's out there on the internet and in print publications and pulling together what they call trying to pull a large language model. So the idea is that this chat is designed around trying to imitate a human as best as possible. And what they're going for is really the natural language processing. They want the output to feel human, which is kind of cool. They're less concerned with the content, like the quality of the content. Like if you asked it 2 times 2 and it told you it was 5, well, I mean, that would be a problem, but they're more concerned with what can it tell you that might be like a teacher in a classroom or like your buddy at the bar, and less about being a calculator.
Or like a real human that might give you the wrong answer.
True, and be very confident in that wrong answer, which you'll see.
Yeah, we know people like that.
Yep, and you'll see it follow that same pattern because it's trained on our real behavior, which is kind of cool. So this version 3 here came out about 2 years ago, and they've just now let the public try it as of, I think it was November, December last year. So now everybody's had a couple of months to play with it, and we're all jazzed up.
So I went out there and I just asked a simple question. So at Trenegy, we write a lot of articles and publish a lot of things. So I thought, okay, well, if I wanted to ask a question, I just asked the question about what is lease accounting? Because we do a lot of work in finance and accounting. And it gave me this nice, succinct answer. And then I said, well, how do I implement lease accounting? And then it gave me a nice answer. I'm looking at it, and everything that it's given me, it's almost like an article that I can just take and not that I would do that, but republish, because I'm looking at it and the answers were correct. Mm-hmm. So where are they getting their information from?
So it's not entirely clear to me. I mean, the bulk of it is written up as saying this is a scrape of the internet and all the resources they provided it from 2019. So largely from internet sources, but that was culled a little bit by humans, and it's still learning. It's the idea behind OpenAI too, is that when you interact with it, it's trying to incorporate your feedback in the responses as well.
Yeah.
So it's still getting new information, even though it's like the bulk of its information now is almost 3 years old.
So I asked it some questions that I didn't think it would know, and I said, what does Trenegy do? Mm-hmm. And they didn't know. So then I said, Trenegy is a management consulting firm, and then it spit back out what a management consulting firm does.
Right.
Now, it was probably 60% correct, but then I gave it some feedback, and I said, no, actually, this is what they do. So I guess they're using some of that feedback that I might provide to say this is not exactly correct. Just like if your buddy in the bar tells you something that's not correct, you say, well, that's not correct. So then your buddy now has better information to work with.
Right, and that's a big part of the future. So GPT-4 is on the horizon for like the end of the year. And they want to push, I mean, that's why we're letting the public use it, right, is push forward its processing, let it interact with people more, and incorporate new sources. And right now they don't let it search the internet. Is one of the things that they've put a cap on this version out there. And so certain questions it'll tell you, hey, I can't go look at the internet, but I can infer some things.
Okay, so what that tells me though, they're scraping the internet. So what that tells me is their information may not be up to date.
Yes, they did. Right. They tell us the date that the data was stopped collecting from the internet was sometime in 2019. So it goes back to like when they say version 3 was finished. And we just haven't been able to access it.
So anything that's happened over the past couple of years may not be, unless somebody provided feedback, may not be incorporated into ChatGPT. So are they
Exactly,
doing
yeah.
that intentional because it's more of a free version that people can test and that type of thing? Because they may not have you got to build some scale to constantly scrape the internet for data.
Totally, and they actually sort of more intend this version to interact with people and learn more so than be a search engine or be an answer platform like a chat room or a Wolfram Alpha or a Reddit, whatever. They want it to be static somewhat so that they can figure out if their model is learning appropriately. Is it inferring things appropriately? So they're going to look at all these responses, or maybe another AI is going to look at these responses. I don't know. But yeah, they want this to not be growing that rapidly right now.
So what's the danger in someone gaslighting ChatGPT? A group of people going in together, providing false information back to the engine and basically disrupting the information people are getting.
It's a great question. I don't actually know how the model would handle that. My guess would be that there's not actually enough sort of momentum to steer it. Right, you would have to let's say just sort of in terms of the way we behave right now with interacting with news or other websites, you would need probably millions of interactions with this thing to steer it, versus what you could probably get your hands on, which is
I know. I'm just
people.
thinking about a group of guys in the college dorm sitting down. Hey, let's go ahead and feed this information about something about the university or some topic that basically gaslights the application into believing that's true, and then people ask the question and it tells them a falsehood. That's what I'm curious.
It's a danger. Yeah. You're right. Could this thing be misled? Like en masse, probably not. Right. This is not like trying to influence one person. This would be trying to like influence several 100,000 or million people at a time. Think about it as like a hive mind as opposed to a friend.
Okay.
So it should be safer from that sort of interaction. Plus, it wasn't fed social media, right? It was trying to learn from.
That's probably a good thing.
Which is a good thing,
yeah.
Right? So its interaction with humans to this point has been through this chat feature. The rest of it has been through more encyclopedia type knowledge.
Okay,
Right.
Because you can type a question out there and ask, what does return on investment mean? It's getting its information from a variety of sources and trying to filter through the best answers.
Yeah.
What are the dangers of plagiarism? Because one of the things, if I go out in the internet right now to Google search, I see who the source is. How are they going to reconcile that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this model is designed to create...
Or is that just a limitation of this, not having the source and people copying source information that comes from somebody else that's word for word, and it's considered... they're plagiarizing something or stealing their, if someone writes a book about, and I keep talking about lease accounting, but a how-to book, and they pull that information in and someone copies that and they unknowingly repost it or republish it. I mean, there's some dangers in that, right?
Dangers and lots of billable hours for lawyers in this new area, right? That's what I'm concerned with too. Will this thing get legislated to death? Will it get sued to death? I don't know. But the goal of the company would be, this is more of an open platform. So they're going to say, like, these are our inputs. This is what is, let's say public domain or common knowledge or, from dictionaries or whatever. And the responses you're getting are supposed to be distinct. It's not supposed to lift, full text things. And if it does, it's supposed to source them. So I went through this exercise with it one time, similar to you, of like, if I was going to write some sort of long form response, blog post, whatever, can I get it to do it? It's a great starting point. But then can I get it to source me appropriately? And it would spit out citations. So that's why universities have already sort of moved to say, like, anything that comes out of there is not your work. It's, I guess, most appropriately right now is treating it like it's another person. So it needs to cite its work, and if you were to cite it, that would be plagiarizing this other person.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, I mean, there's some kinks to be working out around
Totally.
that. So everybody's like, it's going to replace humans. If you start thinking about jobs out there in our economy, where are the most likely candidates that this could replace, reality-wise?
Well, it's interesting. So this sort of business of microblogging sort of already is like that. There are typically not people generating a bunch of the articles we read every day. So that's one of those where the job now is maintaining the articles and working with advertisers, right, to earn money against these sort of articles, right? So then ChatGPT, like, how does that fit in? Okay, well, now you can make better versions of those articles, but without a human being to really capitalize on the avenues that it's distributed, I think that's where those jobs stay safe. And in the case of technology jobs, one of the ones that I've been looking into is programming, because that's been discussed a lot, development work, right? And so this thing is pretty amazing. It can actually spit out complete source code when you ask it to solve a problem in a certain language. It'll even comment the code. It's been caught a few times, back to your previous question, using public code from GitHub, and it just takes the comments from those people along with it. Those are open sources, they're public, so it's okay to use them, but it's doing some of these behaviors right now, and what it can't do is peer review them, right? It doesn't have another OpenAI system to check against. And so in my opinion, the development space is pretty safe, because you should be treating this as a new tool, right? So you're a human being that's got a web development job or a software development job. Use this to augment your skills, right? Use it to do work that you're frustrated doing over and over and over, but validate it.
So it's really not going to necessarily replace a human. It's going to make our human interactions more efficient and be effective at our jobs and being able to get information quickly. So if I need to solve a problem when I'm trying to program something in Python and I need an answer, it's going to give me that answer a heck of a lot quicker than going out and searching Reddit and looking at people's comments. But you have no way of knowing it's really going to work or not. You're pushing your luck, hoping it works.
Yeah, and people have already started leaning on it a bit heavily, right? We're still seeing some of the early results of this saying, like, oh, that's perfect. That's the code I need. I'm going to go put it out in the world. And then you'll get some feedback saying, well, that's not the most efficient way to do that, or it can be done better this way, or, hey, if you do that, things will break. And that's what I picked up from another podcast I look into, and I keep using this terminology that the current version of ChatGPT will be confidently incorrect. And that goes back to something we said at the very beginning. And that level of confidence is going to overwhelm people. Now, back to sort of this, how it might take jobs things. Currently, it won't function without an input, right? So there's no reason to believe that it could just be plopped into some seat in the world that used to have a person driving. You still got to have a human to interact with it. Now,
so is there a danger in I shouldn't say danger, but is there a result in this that causes overpopulation of information, that people are just taking the information it's producing and republishing it more quickly? So all we're just kind of in an echo chamber of information. For example, someone wants to write a piece about particular topic, whether it's information technology or latest trends in change management or whatever it might be. They put that on there, and then instead of me spending 5 days trying to publish something, I spend 5 minutes doing it. And then instead of 20 people doing it, I got 500 people doing it, publishing the same thing, reposting that, and that information just becomes a big echo chamber back into this through the internet. Is that a potential pitfall or issue?
Yes, it is, but I don't actually see it being much different than the current state of things. Traditionally, so like if we see even right before the show, when I just couldn't remember the URL to go to ChatGPT, right? So I typed in that in Google, ChatGPT. Okay, first page I get is OpenAI's website. That's a good response.
Yeah.
The next 5 were sort of this echo chamber reblogging situation of what ChatGPT is, and then an ad, and then what's it going to be next year, and then an ad, right? So those are the types of things that are already being like automatically spit out in the world, and they're all driven by ad revenue. So I suppose there's a chance that there'll be more of those generated more quickly, but there's only so much ad revenue to go around. Traditionally, like if you're not on the first page of a Google result, meaning you've put a lot of work into cultivating those spots, I think there's burnout past those last couple of pages where that probably won't matter. I think people will attempt it. I mean, to answer your question, sure, I think people will attempt it.
Well, and I think maybe the balancing factor in that too is the comment of this replacing Google. How are they going to generate ad revenue through this? And people get concerned about Google or whatever it might be. At one point it was Netscape having kind of a monopoly situation. Is ChatGPT really another competing factor that's, I'll just call it part of our beauty of our economy and capitalism, coming up with an alternative, and maybe that becomes another means, and that creates more opportunities for ad revenue through ChatGPT versus Google?
Okay, so I see maybe this might be a little long-winded, but I kind of see three ways to use search tools on the internet. And if I was going to make a recommendation to our listeners, basically I would treat these three tools to answer three questions. So Google search to me, or Bing search, or whomever, is about finding a website. That should be your primary use case for search, I think. It's going to be finding a product, a review, more simple keywords, less complex question and answer type feedback, right? I need to get somewhere that I can't find on the internet.
So you want to buy something?
Yeah, or you want to get some basic feedback on a product, or you need to get somewhere on the web, right? I think that's a very safe use case for a Google search. What it's less good at is things that contain like popular buzzwords, or if you're crafting a question, it can't infer what a question mark even means, right? And so more complex queries that you want to have a back and forth with. So a back and forth right now doesn't exist in Google. I can type one search query and look at some results, then I can try to change it and keep changing it and keep changing it and keep changing it.
But it doesn't narrow it down. It still goes out to the whole entire web to look for that.
And it doesn't react to your previous query. It doesn't care about what your previous search term was. So you might take something like that. That's where an AI-driven experience is helpful, because it'll work with you to get your answer. And that's where I think it could be really good for, like, hey, I'm trying to solve a problem, a programming problem, a language problem, crafting a sentence, whatever. But you can interact with it back and forth, and you're not kind of you won't fall trapped to the folks that are trying to manipulate the results. The businesses that are driven by ad revenue, they want you on their site.
Right. The ads or the websites that tricked you into going to them because they put every city location on their website, and you're looking for some specific location.
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah. And then sort of the third version of that is a similar sort of complex problem that has dedicated communities that deal with it. And then you're working the same thing back and forth. You're just not getting as quick of a response. But this would be like a Stack Overflow, which is a fantastic website, or the Power BI forums on Microsoft. Like, those are places where you can go with very specific problems, get feedback, and work with people directly. ChatGPT is most in conflict or in competition with specialty sites.
With those forums.
Yeah, I think so. And it's funny because Stack Overflow is actually a site that specifically said, you are not allowed to use responses from the OpenAI product to solve problems here. So they explicitly want that to be a human interaction. And that's because Stack Overflow is dedicated to programming. So it's all about whatever language, it doesn't matter. But there's things that this product just can't infer or string together just yet. So they're taking a stance that says this is not part of our community.
It's driven by purpose, which is different than, say, search engines' purpose.
Right.
But people may be using the search engines to try to answer questions. What is this? Tell me more about this, and learn from that.
Yeah.
And this is going to provide a more efficient means and maybe divert some traffic away from the search engines. What do you see?
It could, sorry to pause right there, like it won't deliver you a URL. So like if you ask a question, it won't direct you to a website. It just it refuses to.
No, I asked that question. I asked the question, give me the top suppliers for management consulting firms in Houston. It gave me a list. And it was a very generic list, but it didn't give me any connection to them. But then you would have to ask another question to say, well, where is this? Where is that? How do I do that?
Yeah.
So it allows you to dive into the questions a little deeper, which I really like. And I think from an educational perspective, this will help people learn things more quickly and maybe even have more of a threat to people having to call their tax person with a question.
Yeah.
And, hey, tell me about this. Maybe they can ask an income tax question that dives deeper and it actually gives you hopefully a reasonably correct answer, but you alluded to earlier, it's like talking to the guy at the bar. He's confidently incorrect.
Yeah, he can be. And I think that a similar type of use case is this, not nascent, but somebody who's early on in a career or somebody who's just really interested in learning. This is a great open-ended experience where if I wanted to know about a topic, I don't have to use that keyword in a search that's going to take me who knows where. I can actually explore a concept maybe a little more. Or, if I want to know something about architecture, I could ask something as obscure as what is the architectural term for a shape that looks like this? And that can take me somewhere that a search can't.
So quite possibly, you start thinking about YouTube and how people are learning things on YouTube and using that as a competitor for going to college, for example. You take the combination of the YouTube how-to videos, ChatGPT. Maybe I have a specific question that I can't get out of a YouTube video about something specific. I go to ChatGPT to ask that question, sort of like asking your professor, who gives you a somewhat informed answer. And then maybe that's where this can be extremely useful.
Absolutely. I don't think we need to see it as more than a supplement for other experiences right now.
Yeah.
Now, the model, the claim right now is the model they want to release at the end of the year is trained on, they use a terminology for this, but right now it's somewhere in the neighborhood of like 175 billion different data points. And the claim is maybe the version that's at the end of the year is closer to 1 trillion. So with 10 times as many data points nearly, how will this react? Will we still treat it as a supplement at the end of the year? Will OpenAI, charge so much money to use it that we'll never get to talk to it again? I don't know.
Yeah. And so if you're thinking longer term, where do you think this goes and what are the opportunities for it? I mean, I hear you saying it's a supplement, but it doesn't sound like it'll be a game changer in our world. AI is and will be, and it has been for a while. But then this particular solution, where do you see it maybe making differences?
I'd like it to stay in a more similar place as it is right now. Like this sort of public iteration of it is new. And I'd love it to stay out there as I'm going to use a bunch of words that can't possibly be true, but idealistically, which I tend to be, it'd be an unbiased sort of public-facing, truly helpful way to interact with information, right? That's probably too utopic. But I would love it to stay that way, as opposed to being a product that's licensed out to only the biggest companies to solve some sort of unique problem, in their business. I can see it going both ways, sure. But
there's already solutions out there that companies buy internally to use for AI inside their company to help with very specific business problems. So that's a little different, but they could step into that space and have a product that's specific around, maybe it's coding, maybe it's helping, maybe the large development houses like Accenture or Cognizant can use this to help or license that from a coding perspective and really build some unique capabilities around how they code and how they develop and improve the efficiency of their developers.
Yeah, and I would say one of the biggest pieces here of this product versus maybe a lot of them is the natural language processing piece. So the way it responds to you and the way it lets you respond to it could be a complete drop-in replacement for any of the things that exist now. A story that I know you like to tell, Bill, is about interacting with chat bot type products on, things you've bought or things you need to return or, have a problem with a product or whatever. You get the responses. They're just reading from prompts that a human wrote. They have no ability to adapt whatsoever.
Well, they're terrible because they ask people to come up with generic answers to questions that they believe that the customer is asking. They may or may not know it's true, but I can predict the answer they're going to give me when I go on a chatbot. So the first question I ask a mathematical question: what's 25 plus 4? And if they can't answer that, I've got a computer. I'm done with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So there's room for that interaction to be better, and that would be great if this is a drop-in, because ideally everybody's experience would get better off something like that. But commercially, if we backtrack a little bit, the idea that a company like, I don't know, we've got companies that are 100 plus years old now. If they could say or license this OpenAI to say, hey, your data set now is the 100 plus years of our company, and every technical spec and every, let's say it's in oil and gas or something, every spec of every hole we've ever drilled in the ground and every problem that came out of it, and you could literally talk to that. It'd be like talking to folks that haven't worked there in decades. There'd be room for like on-the-job mentorship, but then everybody has access to kind of like every person that's ever worked before you. The problem solving that could go into, or that could come out of something like that, could be really powerful.
That's assuming you have the data digitized. Okay. Number one, and number two, the digitized data is accurate.
Sure.
And correct.
Sure.
So there's so many different anomalies out there, but you're right. You could use it in a highly data-intensive organization like an oil and gas company there's so much data out there that these SCADA meters produce on the wellhead all the way through to delivery. Is there a way to use that data and use the AI to help the people who are out there where where maybe you have new engineers who don't have the mentors, or the people aren't around anymore to answer some of those questions from 10 years ago.
Right, and we already know that products like this are very good at identifying trends and showing you, like if you ask them general questions. We can do this today with Microsoft lets you do this with Power BI. You can drop in a Q&A box on a report, and it'll do its best to infer what you want out of it. Like if I say, what would revenue look like in February of 2025? Well, it's going to take all the numerical values it has and try to do a little bit of a forecast. But then that's where that interaction dies. You couldn't then say like, well, but then what if the price of oil is that, right? It has no ability to do this back and forth. So I think there's a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Todd, I appreciate you coming on. I know you've been thinking about this, and you and I have been chatting about this through our actual intelligence back and forth.
Right.
But
my favorite kind of AI.
Yeah, exactly. But the listeners out there, feel free to email us at info@trenegy.com if you have more questions, or if there's topics you want to hear from Todd or any of the other folks at Trenegy about. We're glad to share with you. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you, Bill.